Hello everyone and welcome to another DIY tutorial with Iron Orchid Designs. I'm Natasha and Olivia is doing our project today on camera. We're going to be making these absolutely adorable wooden trinket trays with Mr. and Mrs., which are perfect for weddings or any kind of anniversary gift. Everything we're using today is in the description below. We're going to start with our wooden trays, and ours had a coating on top, so we want to just make sure we use a sanding block to buff that up so that our IOD decor ink is going to sit nicely on that wood. If it has a top coat, it might smudge or not sit in on that tray how we want. So go ahead and prep those with the sanding block and just get that nice and gritted up so that ink's going to take really well. We're going to use our IOD Apothecary label stamp for our little letters on this project and our Mercantile stamp for some of the decorative borders. And then we're going to finish that with our larger letterpress stamp letters, and we're going to be using the words Mr. and Mrs., but you could also customize this with a longer name or word if that felt more appropriate for your project. And here we're just going to grab our letters off our letterpress stamp, and we're going to grab the little period, and we're just going to work on arranging our composition before we apply any ink, making sure that it's all planned out. Since we're doing these directly on the wood, we want to take extra time to make sure that everything's just right so that we don't have to redo anything, because it would be harder to get that ink up off. You'd have to really sand it off to be able to redo it since we're not doing paint. So just really take your time here. And this is a great time to think about grabbing one of our thin mounts from your stockist and cutting it down to size. Especially since this project, we have these lips, you have to really kind of work around that. So we just grab an extra thin mount and we cut that down, and we use this for our smaller letter applications. It works great. The thin mounts aren't too expensive, so having one that's cut up to different sizes for these projects is really great. So once you have that composition all lined up, go ahead and press down with your thin mount and pick up those letters. We're going to go ahead and ink up our black ink pad, get that nice and juicy with some fresh ink. These are our IOD decor inks. You can pick those up from your local stockist using our store locator on the Iron Orchid Designs website and the red Where to Buy button. So now we're going to get these nice and inked up. You can see that our M is not wanting to stay on the thin mount. If you get too much dust or debris built up on the back of that stamp or thin mount, it's not going to stick. If you take some alcohol, you can go ahead and clean that up and get that to stick. Unfortunately, we did not have any in the office. Can you tell? So we just went ahead and stamped without it since it wouldn't stick, and we're going to go back in and add that in the next step. So make sure you commit and don't shift as you're putting those stamps down on your surface. You can see Olivia here is holding down with steady pressure with her fingers and then just moving one of her hands around to get nice good contact on the other areas. She's going to come back in and hand stamp that M in front of Mrs., getting that nice and lined up before she pushes down and gets that stamp in there. All right, that's looking great. Now, when you have repeated letters, like in 2024, you have to just make sure you create spacing in your thin mount layout so that you can come back in with that letter and stamp it in later, since you only have one of each letter. We like to put that on our thin mount, so it just gives us a little bit more control. And you can see that what we actually have isn't even a thin mount here. We actually cut down one of the stamp backings, which can work as a flexible thin mount. So if you don't have a thin mount you want to cut up, you can go ahead and do that. Here we've chosen our second decorative element, and you can see Olivia is using the edge of that thin mount to just line it up and get a nice, good, clean impression. We've added our period, and wow, there we have our first tray. These are looking great. We're going to go ahead and go in and do our second tray, our matching Mr. tray. Again, just looking at which kind of decorative elements we think are going to be best. We think this dividing border, which I think came from the Apothecary labels, if not it was the Mercantile, but I'm pretty sure that one's the Apothecary. We're going to go ahead and use that one on the top. It feels a little bit more masculine, so we think that's going to look nice. And again, lining up our stamps, make sure they're clean if you're doing this so you don't leave any little smudges. You can clean that with a wet wipe. The ink comes off really easily. And then coming back in again with our cut up thin mount and using that edge of the tray as a nice guide, so that way after we've inked up our stamp, we'll literally just be able to press the thin mount up against that edge, getting it nice and centered, and then pushing that down to get our impression. Again, usually you would have the M on here. Ours just didn't want to stick. So make sure that if you're having any sticking issues to use some alcohol to clean those up, and you will be doing much better than us. All right. And getting good contact, and always just lift straight up, making sure not to get any smudging. And then she's coming back in and just hand adding that mister. And then she's going to come back in and add our second 2 for 24. And then we're going to add that other decorative element with our little makeshift thin mount. And there you have it. We have our 2 matching trays. You're going to want to set these aside to dry because you don't want any smudging of that ink. Once they're nice and dry, you can go ahead and apply your top coat of choice. We're using a General Finishes Flat Out Flat. There's lots of different options for finishers and top coats. So talk to your local stockist. They're likely to have something that will help you out and be able to give you a good recommendation. And if you have any questions on what to use, our Facebook Creative Tribe is full of so many knowledgeable people, our stockists. So if you ever get stuck, because there really are so many different products you can use in coordination with IOD, our creative tribe has so many answers and so many ideas. So we are so much better when we're working in community. So we're just going to finish those up with the foam brush and set those aside to dry. And now you have these amazingly cute trays that are perfectly giftable for weddings, anniversaries, and you could even customize this for a birthday. Make sure you like and subscribe for more DIY tutorials with IOD.